Welcome back, everyone, to this month's Real Estate Roundtable. I'm your host, Andreas Senie. Joining us this month are Saul Klein and Darren Hayes, talking all the big things that make the world move in real estate, technology, cybersecurity, and car washes. Hat tip to Saul for this car wash. We're going to make this car wash famous through these shows.
We should.
We're going to get it there, truly. So, as is the format of this show, hopefully everyone listening knows who we are at this point, but for the new listeners tuning in, let's just go around quickly, introduce one another, introduce ourselves, and then from there we'll go into the big business, the big things affecting business today from each of the places we sit. Saul and go ahead, Saul, let you introduce yourself, given your background. You can do it much better than I can.
Well, so I'm just an old real estate broker. I've been involved in technology since the 90s, and I own a car wash. And so I want to say that we can kind of track the economy to some degree based on how well the car wash does and the seasonality of the car wash business, and it might affect other businesses. So we were talking about this earlier, that normally the summer and the springtime, really good time for the car wash. Winter, not so much, and early January, terrible. And so we just came off January. January was a slow month. December was slow, but not as slow as January. And now the days are getting longer, so we're looking for good things.
Oh, and cyclical business cycles of business. That's a great topic we should touch on through the show. And of course, welcoming back my good friend Darren Hayes, Professor Darren Hayes, one of the top 10 forensic computer scientists, and certainly the smartest guy I know if I'm in trouble for my cybersecurity needs at Code Detectives. Darren, just a quick intro on what you do. And
Sure. So I teach at Pace University, and I also have a consulting company, Code Detectives LLC. So I'm involved in all matters cybersecurity as well as digital forensics. So great to be here.
Love it. Welcome back. And thank you to all our listeners for joining in, and my co-hosts here for taking the time to really give a holistic picture of what's happening and how it affects our businesses. So Saul, you hit the nail on the head in where I'm sitting. Your car wash and the cyclical nature of it and how it can act as a barometer for the industry. Is that accurate?
So yeah, as a matter of fact, we probably could see some correlations if we paid enough attention to it. So you make this really great point, and people kind of lose sight of it, and that is the economy. There is a cycle. There's a business cycle, and there's a real estate cycle, and it goes through phases. Right, expansion, prosperity, recession, depression. Looks like a curve, right? Expansion, prosperity, recession, depression. And it repeats itself. And so they started tracking this like in the 1850s or something, and they've tracked like 37 turns in the business cycle since they started paying attention to this. So we know that sometimes the economy's good and sometimes it's not so good, and there are things that affect that. One thing that we're concerned about right now is inflation, where we've got lots of money, but we don't have as much product and production as we need to have to support all that money. And so prices go up. People don't understand that. They think it's temporary. We can actually go back and look historically. Remember, it's cyclical. And so there are things that we can recognize in past cycles that will help us today in dealing with what a lot of people aren't expecting. And it could be a little tighter than a lot of people think it might be.
Absolutely. I mean, the commuting cost to go from Connecticut to Manhattan has gone up 60%. That is 60%. That's gas and tolls. And that is before, and recently they're approving commuter tax, a commuter increase in the tolls for congestion, a congestion increase. Meanwhile, the public transit is at all-time lows, because nobody wants to be that close to one another. So they're punishing all the people who have to make it in with these exorbitant fees. Certainly, I'm assuming for good reason that I don't quite understand, because that's not my market real estate wise, but I'm assuming these taxes have places to go and infrastructure to support. Minimally, all the camera systems here in New York to give you tickets when I'm in New York. I'm in New York now. When you're driving around, and that's a hat tip over to Darren and the Big Brother community for the new way of policing. But So tell me more about, you've been here, you've been a realtor for how many years, Saul?
It's 1975.
Since the start of the internet, and
Oh,
helped you
way
come
before.
online with all
Well, actually, yeah, the internet started in 1969. The web happened about 1993, 1994. So definitely in the early years where I went to school, we actually had something called the Princeton Dartmouth time sharing computer system. This was in the late 60s, where the colleges and universities were sharing, computer services. We had big terminals, and they didn't have monitors. You had yellow paper that rolled out of, but you played games on them and everything, and that the yellow paper would roll out, and you'd read the results of shooting torpedoes or whatever you were doing and playing those games. But you talk about this idea of the economy being flexible, and it goes up and it goes down, and it's important for people that are in the real estate industry to pay attention to this, because there are opportunities that kind of pop up, and we've talked about this before, and that is that the federal government there's going to be major changes to land use, and one of them you see every day. You might not really understand what it's about, but we've been seeing it for years, and that is that there's concern over the number of automobiles that are on the road, and so for a number of reasons. And so one of the ways to cut down on the use of automobiles is to increase the price of fuel. In San Diego, we have our San Diego combined governments have now allocated $150 billion over 20 years to redo the transportation system in San Diego. And part of the way they want to do this is add a 6 cents a mile gasoline tax on top of, like $5 a gallon. And you say, what's the motivation? The motivation is they don't want people to drive. And so now we've been building light transit or light rail in San Diego now since I was listing and selling real estate apartment buildings in the 1980s. And this was like a dream. We're going to build this light rail. It's going to connect all these pieces. So they started to build it, and they built it out. And for many years, including today, nobody used it. And so they built out the system, and now they're driving up. We think in some neighborhoods, we think, geez, the neighborhood's too crowded. They need to add another lane. But no, they don't add another lane. They close the parking lane and they create a bike lane. So they actually take less. In some major cities where they used to have parking requirements for buildings, they no longer have parking requirements for buildings. So they don't want you to drive. They don't want you to own new cars. So the things you mentioned about commuting, from Connecticut to New York, I can understand that. This is by design in some cases, and the government uses its powers, either carrot or stick, to get social results that it wants. It does this all the time, and one of the best examples is the tax structure. If they want people to invest in money, they give them tax benefits. If the government wants to support housing, it lets you write off the interest on your loan. If it wants you to build certain types of things, you get tax credits for. So the government uses, if you don't pay your taxes, then you get fined. So the government uses these tools to get this. It's social engineering. And typically we think of taxes and social engineering, but now we're seeing, with all this funding coming down, we're not talking about inflation, but with all this funding coming down, we're going to see that we get social issues are addressed, and they're addressed through the financing that comes from the federal government.
Well, it's a near and dear cause to everyone, right? Financing and funding availability, and the cost of money. And if it's harder to get money, or there are more rebates in place to go green with your car, and more on that in a minute. Rebekah Carlson and Chris Abel are joining us. They'll be just in just a moment. Hey guys, welcome.
Hey.
We're talking about the most exciting thing in business: inflation, for those collecting, but not for those of us spending more each day. And how, to Saul's point, finance is the number one tool for social change at the end of the day. What you can borrow, how you can borrow, where your rebates are. Although I think the number one tool to change anything in this world is technology. Darren. Welcome. Could you guys just quickly intro over for our new listeners joining us for the first time, and then I want to come right back to Saul's point on this inflation how cyclical business and our world is affecting us. Welcome, Chris and Becca. Nice to see you both.
I can't hear a word anyone's saying.
In that case, you cannot go first, Chris.
I'll go first because I can hear everybody. Hey, it's great to see everybody, and really, really glad to be back. I was in the back room, backstage, electronic backstage, listening to Saul talk about this topic, and I really am excited to hear more about what you have to say, Saul, because I think you've got some great insight for where we're at right now and for where we get to go, right? Because we've got a whole future ahead of us.
Lots to do.
And Chris, I'm assuming you can't hear us, so we're going to come back to you. Nope. So Saul, continue on. I'm going to bear with me as I chat him. There we go. Mr. Mendoza, thank you. Production master in the back, fixing things and getting things organized. So inflation and cyclical change, apartments and life, you were saying?
Yeah, so well, we covered a couple points here. One, we talked about the cyclical nature of the economy. And it makes sense to kind of pay attention to that because ups and downs, there are opportunities, right? So the threats and opportunities, regardless of what's happening. So people should pay a little bit more attention to it. You know, so I've been around this long enough to have seen cycles complete themselves. And there is a certain similarity in the way these things repeat. And part of the issue is inflation. And we've been talking about that for a long time. And now you hear other people talking about it. And it's a lot of this has to do, and people will deny this, but it has to do with just too much money chasing too few goods. And so one way or another, we're having trouble with availability of things. And that drives part of what drives prices up.
So are you saying we are about to shift in our cycle into a downward trend, or in a downward trend, or on our way up?
Well, I think we're going to continue to see, we never got out of the last recession, really. And
Yep.
so with monetary supply. So I think we're going to continue to see interest rates go up to some degree. Can't see them go up all the way just because of the nature of the structure of government, right? Where it brings money in and then it's got certain things that are discretionary and then there's certain things that are not discretionary, right? That it can't mess with. So as these non-discretionary areas grow, the areas of discretionary spending will change. So now they're spending a lot of money is being allocated to what we'll refer to as infrastructure without really looking at what we're talking about. But a lot of money is going to be spent in infrastructure. That'll help because that'll give people jobs. That'll get people back to work. Also, the intention is to change transportation in this country, and the Department of Transportation is going to spend a lot of money to do that. It's toward these trends that we talked about: greater walkability, less driving, money to come into an area to give people increased densities, but money coming in from the federal government to be spent locally in things like federal block grant financing and loans and rebates. If you do the things like build a certain number of units for a certain income or put a certain use on a property, they'll give you more, you can do more. And so to drive these social changes, which really for housing, we're looking at higher densities. They're real simple because if you look at what drives prices up is you build a house and the house actually wears out over time. But what happens, but the price goes up. So what's happening is the land value is going up. And so how do you regulate a house values going down? You can take an old house in any city, a house has gone down in value dramatically, but the price has tripled. Well, what's gone up in value? The land. And so we see this in a lot of areas now where they're looking at increasing the land density, changing the zoning, and that's going to have a lot of effects on people one way or another.
So you're already seeing these changes in California, the changes in density, the changes in zoning. Connecticut is not as flushed out, at least where I live. I'm not in Hartford, I'm not in a major city, so I'm not seeing the rapid change. I am seeing, to your point, many developers getting great opportunities through housing opportunities, affordable housing opportunities. And Becca over in Chicago, is Chicago making these changes? Are they in pace with California at all? Go ahead.
So I think Chicago, we're focusing a lot on adaptive reuse. So we're repurposing a lot of our office buildings, and I'm seeing that city, suburbs, everywhere. We're working on just making a lot of changes in our approach. And a lot of that just has to do with pandemic vacancy and things like that. We're still struggling as a market with a lot of those factors. So further into the city, there's been a constraint on supply for residential, as is kind of traditional. It's hard to build in Chicago. It's hard to develop new properties, and so we do see that that's going to take a lot of the absorption, but we also think it's going to take a long time for us. So land values constantly increase, of course, because it's finite, right? Like there's only so much land, but we are also seeing owners struggle a little bit with how they're going to change their business model of how they're utilizing that land.
Wow. And I mean, certainly a lot of even my clients, not even every broker I know has clients that are on the verge of struggling. Even if they've held it together thus far, there's concern out there, and shifting use. And most of my clients are new build at this point. The shifting, they can't shift use. They're 2 years into the 4-year exit or the 3-year exit, so everything is tight. So really hoping for good things, and we'll get through this, and there'll be good things on the horizon. If not, I'll get new clients to buy out those properties if you have any, and my clients will understand, and we'll still do business together on the brokerage side. And Darren, I mean, this extended pandemic and these adaptive reuse, I mean, shipping, warehousing, all have all gone up in many areas. Looking at last year specifically, or God, I tell you, 2020 is like a wash in my mind. 2 years ago, Amazon's buying up everything for warehousing. Security is on the forefront. You're buying up on-premise servers. Then we went to the cloud, and now it seems like, from what I hear, that companies are focusing more on their security digitally, especially with data security laws coming into place worldwide in a much more aggressive fashion. Google Analytics getting sued overseas and so forth. Are you seeing that or hearing that in academia, that people are shrinking down their
Yeah,
tech spend? Or go ahead.
no, I think that this is definitely the era of, the employee has the power these days if they're in cybersecurity, especially because it just became so attractive for people to cash out their retirement funds and retire from cybersecurity, and so there's even more of a gap in terms of open vacancies for people in cybersecurity. So it is going to cost more for companies to get that skill set in, and it's also just going to cost more for them to run cybersecurity. And we have seen a ramp up in attacks from countries like Russia. So, with any potential kinetic war that may happen between Russia and Ukraine, we've seen huge amount, big increase of cybersecurity attacks. But also the U.S. has many agencies have been under attack by Russia, and so we're not hearing a lot about that in the news because everybody's so focused on troops and land war. But it's a challenging time for employers, for companies who are trying to get that talent in the door. So it's what's interesting about what Saul said about money supply and that kind of thing. I think that maybe a slight increase in interest rates may benefit. I know that Europe and the U.S. in terms of interest rates, they follow one another quite closely. And in Europe, what's been happening is the banks have actually been trying to close down a lot of consumer accounts, and they've been telling customers, we don't want your money anymore. And if you do keep your money with us, we're going to actually charge you money because of negative interest rates. And so this is kind of a lot different from what we're seeing over here. I think banks tend to be a lot friendlier rather than send these threatening letters out that people in Ireland and the UK and other Western European countries are getting at the moment. But also another thing that Saul mentioned that I thought was quite interesting was when he was talking about cars and taxes on vehicles and that kind of thing. A big move that's been happening. I think that what happened in Glasgow in terms of climate change has really, pushed a lot of scrutiny towards companies and what companies are doing in terms of sustainability and lowering their carbon footprint. And now there's a lot of indices that are publishing information about how green companies are. Like for example, a report just came out about English Premier League teams and how they rank in terms of sustainability, whether those players for those teams who are making millions are now flying on jets or whether they're traveling in a bus that's operated on biofuels. I've seen a lot of sports teams who have set up allotments, growing vegetables actually at these arenas and that kind of thing, which is very, very kind of interesting. And I'm just kind of wondering if that kind of thing may happen over here. I mean, California is usually the lead when it comes to sustainability and lowering carbon footprint, but it's kind of interesting what's happening over there and what I've been reading about.
Well, I'll let Sal answer on sustainability in California as the forefront, because it's the forefront. But I mean, globally, the net zero carbon emission goals being put forth by all the major bodies is impressive, I think. But going back to and pinning on your earlier points all about a gas tax, how long did it take California for that gas tax to help for this change in the infrastructure?
Well, so
To
two
get you
things, couple things. Number one, a year or two ago, I lose track of time, we had a state law passed, proposition. So in California, we have legislation by proposition. So if you can get people to vote for something, you don't need a legislature because you can get people to change things. And so we had a proposition, but oftentimes what happens when there are propositions, they word them the opposite of what they mean. And so this was one of those where if you voted no, it meant yes. And so they put a gas tax on the ballot, and it was with increases every year without approval. And then they ran the ads, and vote no actually meant yes. And so the proposition won. So the state now has this new tax per gallon on gasoline. But then locally in my market in San Diego County, you've got an entity you got a lot of different governments because you got all these small towns. You got San Diego's a big city, but it's got La Mesa and El Cajon and Chula Vista and Carlsbad, right? All these in San Diego County, all these cities. So all these combined governments have their own government body. And that's called SANDAG. And SANDAG wants to redo transportation in San Diego, as I mentioned, $150 billion over 20 years. And part of this will be funded out of the proposal, which is a 6-cent a mile gas tax on everybody. How they collect it, how they enforce it, but 6 cents a mile. So imagine where you're commuting. And typically the people that are commuting from the furthest out are the people that don't make any money, right? So they got to commute all the way in so they can be a waiter in a restaurant downtown, and then they got that what they're going to do is force people to use light rail, and that cleans the environment, it fixes it, right? So lower carbon footprint. Now this is another piece that people don't think about. A friend of mine always says you can't trade what you can't grade, and so you need to be able to grade real estate in a better way than you did. You need to be able to grade the loans and the loan portfolios on the high-rise buildings in New York City because they might be underwater in 30 years. Now I'm just making that up. But the fact is there are going to be certain things climate-wise that nobody's factored into risk on loans, on real estate, and that's going to happen at some point. And so you're going to start to see a lot of the Wall Street firms looking more at this idea of transparency in property and risk and climate change. That's going to be a big driver.
Well, and so speaking of transparency, I wanted to talk to you about Google getting sued in marketing. So I'm glad you made the call. A bit here and cookies going away. So I guess less transparency for the people trying to sell us things. But to your point, Sal, so just to reframe what you said, here's the new tax. It's affecting those who can't afford to pay it. But is it also pushing people to go greener faster with their cars?
That's part of the intent. That's part of the intent.
That's
and
part
then
of the secondary
providing public transportation as a viable alternative, right? I mean,
so really what you're saying is
you got to get people to ride the subway. I mean,
yeah, the month
do it, but they don't do it here. They drive cars.
Well, they're not doing it now. They raised the toll tax, the tolls so much to start us to get everyone back, but that hasn't worked. So now you're telling me I'm looking at a gas tax because it's successful there.
And the purpose is to raise funds to change transportation. And what we have to realize from a real estate perspective is transportation is a big piece of value. And so if you look at where the real estate values have progressed over many years. Typically, it follows the travel. I might have told you my grandfather, who was a firefighter and a real estate broker, said to me years and years, just figure out where the roads are going to go and go way out and buy the real estate out there. And the roads will grow out to you, and then you'll make a lot of money. And so that's what happens, right? They're going to build these roads. Roads add to value. They built the highway system. That added to a lot of value across the country, changed people's habits. And now we realize that we can't sustain that any longer. We can't police it. We can't clean it up. We can't fight the fires on it. So we have to bring people back in, and that's the intention. And the atmosphere is getting too dirty, and there's no social equity. And right, I mean, there's this whole big and people can't afford to buy houses. And so we got to cut the land value in half so we can build 2 houses there. So there's a lot of stuff's going on right now. At the end of
I would I was just going to add to that. You know, a lot of people think about greenhouse gases and carbon footprint in terms of energy, but like in the UK, for example, they're actually doing evaluations on clothing and how much carbon was used to produce this type of soccer jersey, how much was used to produce this kind of material. And so people are being provided with more information about the carbon footprint with manufacturing individual products. And companies are actually changing how they produce products. But also it's going to impact real estate because people are thinking about when they're building new houses, how are they going to, you know, be more efficient with those houses in terms of not just, you know, everything from water usage to energy and recycling energy and that kind of thing.
Well, really, this shift is more than, it's not cyclical in nature, but the generational shift, which we touched on 2 shows ago, I believe, is here. So impact giving, impact charity, social good, as all stated, and
Right.
marketing, I'm sure is seeing this everywhere. Everybody's adjusting their brands to reach the younger millennial markets where they have money to spend and they can move in and they're happy to ride the rail because they're not as worried about COVID, right? And they're happy to do all these different things with these green shirts because they're looking for. I hope I don't get in trouble for saying it this way, but I think of it as the now. It has to be instant. It has to be now. Whereas traditional companies, infrastructure plays, things, and real estate being one of them, take time. They take vision. They take strategy to really, as you said, go out to the farthest corner because you know the road will get there and buy it and hold it. These companies are now being very splashy about what they support and what they do. Actually, curiously enough, and I don't know if anyone on the call has heard more about them, but the green certifications they were giving to building owners. I wonder what large incentives are coming down the line in that area, carbon, or for improving the quality of air in your building, you know, a COVID safe building, because there are providers out there trying. But I don't want to dialogue the entire call here without saying hi to Becca. How are things in marketing? To jump into the foray here. You joined us late, but welcome. What's going on in the world of marketing?
So things are really busy in marketing right now. Am I with you?
You're with us. Looks like the sun's setting there.
All right.
It's already set here.
So, I think a street light. I actually have a new client and spent some time touring at one of their buildings just a few minutes ago. So had to take this one from the car. Things have been very, very busy, and I'd like to say that it's because there's so much happened in the digital space, but I'm actually seeing a lot in the physical space. Surprise, as people are positioning prop for sale, for lease. I've got a client investor that raised their $20 million fund in, four Zoom, what they say, four Zoom calls and meetings.
Is that a
Entirely
benchmark now?
yeah,
People
pretty crazy,
benchmark
right?
four meeting. Sorry, 4 Zoom and 4 meetings. I'll get it done in 4 Zoom and 4 meetings and 4 Zoom.
Right.
Cute.
So things happening. So people who started things a few months ago are actually bringing them to fruition right now. And there is a lot of money out there and a lot of money to a lot of different product type. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that strategies play into that. And so that's a random call. Marketing's so hot right now that people can't seem to keep their marketing staff. So that's why I get called out buildings to go take pictures at 4 o'clock on a Thursday night in Chicago, is because an emergency. So it's kind of,
Well,
it's an interesting, and it's busy.
Well,
Sorry.
I agree there. It is busy. There's plenty going on where if you can look and find it, there's a lot going on. In all of our respective spaces, including data advocacy, including cybersecurity. But now two people here have now touched on a lack of help, a lack of good help. Now, Darren said because people are leaving because they retired. Did marketers retire? Did they just say screw it, I'm done? Or people are just hard to find and marketing is that busy?
Marketing's that busy. People are
Marketing's
just that
busy.
hard to find. I think it's, I think it's comparable to nursing, in my opinion, because I'm always looking for more people, and I'm willing to train. Like we have a number of people on our team who've never even done marketing before, but they've been professionals and done a lot of different other kinds of roles. But I do see that getting new hires that have a marketing background is very challenging. So companies are really trying to retain them, and or they're so busy they don't even have time to look for something new.
So I listen to podcasts, not just this one, but others all the time. But I have been inundated with Indeed every job thing under the sun is coming over the airwaves in my car. And I just wonder if that's a marketing push or if there's just this disconnect in the economy right now between help or people that want to work or people are afraid to work because the stimulus is over. So they've got to be doing something. My landlords are getting paid, those with tenants, and those that aren't are evicting. So have evicted and they're filling or repositioning.
So Becca, is the role of a marketer changing, right? Are the things that the people you hire different than they were? Do they need different skill sets or different connections, or is it still all the same and they're all doing the same stuff that they did?
Yeah.
Saul, it has radically changed in the past 3 years. So, I mean, you go back 5 years, like when I started my company almost 5 years ago, I don't know if I ever could have planned for what we do every day. Like the speed with which and the ability with which we can modify video, for instance, the speed with which we can change branding and develop strategy and create logos. I mean, it is really, really unbelievable how quickly it's accelerated during pandemic time, especially. And I think that's probably part of it too, because suddenly I would, you'd hire somebody who can do one thing, but that one thing has shifted and modified and grown so tremendously over the past couple of years that it's like, so I really actually just, I need a bunch of people who can kind of do everything. Like now.
Generalists, go-getter generalists.
Right. Yeah. Your average go-getter generalist.
I've never met an average one. A true generalist who could do it well, I have not met. That can jump in that well. Well, except this group. Most of us are generalists in some aspects.
Hey, we were talking about interest rates, right? We didn't really kind of finish that idea about interest rates. So interest rates are going to go up, but they can only go up so far because we talked about these non-discretionary expenses, and one non-discretionary expense is interest on the national debt. And so we have to pay interest on this debt, and the more debt, the more interest we have to pay, and interest is a non-discretionary expense. The government has to pay the interest. It might not have to pay certain other programs, and that's what the fight is all about, but that's the smallest piece of the pie. The big piece of the pie are the non-discretionary items. And so interest rates can go up, but think about who's the biggest debtor. The U.S. government. If interest rates go up, who's going to end up paying the most money? The U.S. government. And so there's reasons as to why interest rates might not get to the point where they need to be, which happened back in the 70s. And we had a guy named Paul Volcker. And he was the chairman of the Federal Reserve, and he wasn't afraid to just raise interest rates. And he just ran, they were up to, and some of you might remember, we were selling houses with 18% interest, right? People would buy houses because they knew it would be 19 tomorrow, and they knew the house would be more expensive. And so I don't anticipate that much of a change, no matter what the inflation is, just because of the financial situation the country is in.
Well, so with everyone on the call, are people being more cautious because of it? I don't want to say inflation. I think I would reason that people are more thinking more globally. I think COVID made everyone wake up to the fact that, as you bring up in a lot of your talks, Sal, that paradigm shifts really happen. Even if true, any house anywhere, everyone was affected by COVID, and probably for the first time ever across generations, because it affects every age. The the acute idea that, hey, something can really drastically change everything to do with my life is permeating, and people are cautious, more cautious than they were. They're stepping out cautiously, and I think a part of that is why they're not going into these new jobs. They don't know which jobs will be there. Back to your point, is it better to be a specialist or a generalist? You need generalists, but most companies like to hire specialists. And then Saul and Darren, what does the future look like for these companies and these government and these municipalities, these organizations, if they try to figure out the way to grow? I mean, the legislature is coming. We've seen that, as Saul has pointed out in a prior show. What is happening now was scheduled 10 years ago. My question is, what's going to happen in 10 years that's being decided now because of all this? How do we plan for that as business owners, as people that lead discussions? How do we help our peers? What's happening in each of the different areas that you can see?
So I talk a little bit about the real estate industry, and technology's got it playing a big part of this, and that is that there's going to continue to be commission compression. And so when we look in general at real estate, we look at it at a bigger piece of it. Let's look at it from when somebody decides they're interested in buying a piece of real estate until the loan's paid off. Now, during that period of time, a lot of money is spent by people. A lot of hands touch the transaction. More hands that touch the transaction, the more expensive it is. And so what's happening now, particularly with blockchain architecture and some of the other things, we're seeing more transactions faster. We're seeing greater capabilities. And so that's going to affect, if you think about every time on the loan side or on the real estate side, people can take human costs out of the work if it's possible, that's what they'll do. And so the technology will continue to fine tune the mortgage side, which means you're going to need fewer mortgage loan officers. And it will also start to fine tune the real estate agent side. If you can cut off a lot of the expense on the mortgage side, and consumers want this, right? You can ask a consumer, would you rather pay more or less, right? And so they're going to want to pay more on both sides. That's going to change the role of each. And it might even combine the roles. Who knows where that goes? But people need to be looking for. So we've talked about this for years. People that sell real estate need to become consultants, right? That we're going to change from being sales to being more consultative. And then what allows them to do that is looking at data, using data in a way that it helps them figure out where things are going to be in the future, turning information into insight, and that'll help us make the right decisions about land use. But if we just leave it up to the people that buy the land based on the zoning to build what they want to build, then we'll have what we have now, and that's shortages. People can't afford to buy, right? The old model of everybody buying is kind of dying, although I think that that's going to come back in a new way with fractionalized ownership. But it's paradigm shift, and paradigm shift is a fundamental shift, right? I know it's an overused word, but it's all we're talking about is when there's something, not just a change, but something that's so fundamental. You know, like the NFL went to golf balls instead of footballs, right? So that's like fundamental. That's going to change the skills people need, and it's going to change the cost, right? It's just fundamental change. That's a paradigm shift. And there are a lot
Things
of
are fundamentally changing. But so what I'm hearing from you is we need to be generalists. as
Well,
professionals?
we need to pay attention. We maybe need to do more than one thing at a time. And from a real estate agent's perspective, what they need to start doing is learning about all the technology that their clients are going to hear about, that their clients are going to be interested in. And if you have a question about one of these new real estate company that sells fractionalized ownership or vacation homes or whatever they sell, who should you ask? You should ask your real estate agent, because they're your real estate consultant. And if they don't know the answers to all of these different things, the good, the bad, and the ugly about any of these companies, then they're not doing their job as a real estate consultant, as a real estate professional. So as we see all these new technologies in, we got to figure out, how do they benefit consumers? What's the detriment to consumers? If it's real estate related, then the role of the realtor becomes, or the real estate professional becomes, to help explain this once every 6 year transaction to somebody in a way that they understand it, taking advantage of the technology and the data, knowing you're going to have to do it for less money.
And less money and higher costs and higher inflation. And and Becca, on the marketing side, to Sal's statement that, why not eliminate costs? Are you seeing, and not to put a fine point, laser point on the subject, are you seeing marketing inclusive of real estate brokers today? Are your investors and everyone going out looking for deals or promoting deals? Are they still as broker friendly in their language, or is it already shifting and I'm going to go direct consumer to consumer? Because I can, at least until the cookies disappear, which is a placeholder for that question about cookies disappearing. So then time you over to Darren.
So what I'm seeing thus far is that the camaraderie of the commercial real estate industry remains. So when you've got professional investors who are looking at multiple markets, they still want to utilize the brokerage community, and they're happy to do so. On occasion, I have recently, actually, for another client that's raising an investment fund, their broker came to them and said, "We want to work with you. I want to be your broker, but I don't have to be exclusive, and I don't expect you to sign an exclusivity clause." So I was a little surprised at that, quite frankly, because I I don't think that was something I would have expected. I would have maybe a negotiation, maybe some sort of piece, but for the broker to offer, "I will work for you and I will look for properties for you
Free,
in 10, 20
potentially.
markets for free." That was very, very unexpected. So I am seeing some shifts in behavior and shifts in perspective in relation to that contract piece, and we'll see what goes. We'll see what goes from there as far as what the next steps are. So very unexpected.
Yeah, no, it's been a long time since I would, if ever. For those that don't know on the call, we sign exclusives are just poorly named. An exclusive agreement should be called an inclusive agreement, because when you sign exclusively for my services as a broker, that means I can shout about your property from the mountaintops. It means I am your biggest champion. We are your biggest champion. When it's an open listing, we don't, or it's being shopped by many brokers, the likelihood of getting paid or not getting paid starts to dwindle, and we have to be much more coveted with what we share. So that to me is a paradigm shift to hear that is happening out there. But if you have the address of that property, do let me know. I'll see if I can get licensed in that market. Just kidding. But I am going to piggyback on the cookies thing. As far as cookies, is this something? And I just have to bring that tech side in because I don't see as often as I'd like. Is this a big concern for real estate professionals marketing? I mean, targeted keywords, I guess, are easy, but they're super expensive. And retargeting, is this even on people's radar for you and for marketing? This change for retargeting and cookies.
So I mean, I hear nobody talking about it.
Okay, I'm a little more on the tech side now. I'm hearing the grumblings. And Darren, on your end, these what I can only call more and more news articles on privacy. Where's my data? How's it being used? Can I be forgotten? Is there any grumblings in the academic world or in the cybersecurity world on cookies tracking these changes? Is there a paradigm shift coming, or is it all puff in the air, just hype?
Yeah, I think that everybody initially said, oh, people on Facebook, the younger generations, they don't really care about privacy, but I think they do care more and more about privacy, and I think that companies have found that they can't just treat their whole data set of personal information with one policy, because they've got so much personal information with European citizens, with Canadian citizens, with US citizens, that they've had to develop policies to protect that data with a single approach, more of a single approach, because they don't always know. I mean, one of the problems working in incident response, for example, is when a breach has occurred and you have all these expats and more people who are working remotely, what's key is, where are they resident? And a lot of companies don't know where these people whose information has been exposed are actually resident right now. Okay. Are they working remotely in the UK? Are they working remotely in France? And that really impacts the disclosure to the local regulator. And so that's why, companies have decided that they have to have a unified approach to how they protect data and make sure that personal information isn't compromised for everybody, and that they're storing somewhat less data sometimes because of the risk of regulatory fines. I think also that the shift that's happening, just piggybacking off what Saul said, is there's always this continual try to push employees out and use technology to answer questions. And I think that the artificial intelligence just isn't there. The technology isn't there. I mean, I'm sure everybody on this call knows when you've tried to use one of these automated chats that it just does not work. And people have so many unique situations because we all use technology very differently, and we all have so many different types of technical devices that we need help with, or services that we need, that that there's so much uniqueness to every query, and pulling so many people out of the equation has just been a nightmare. I mean, I had an issue that I was trying to fix with Microsoft, for example. It was a fraud alert, and I wanted to check on this fraud alert, and I couldn't find an 800 number. I looked online, and I heard that they have disabled that now, so you can't even call about fraud alerts and that kind of thing, which, and there's no automated way of dealing with these kinds of things, so I think that a lot of people will pay a premium to speak to a person today and avoid some of that artificial intelligence and that technology. I mean, I think that's why, Apple, we're all overpaying for Apple devices, but we know that we can speak to a person at the end of the day if we have a problem with one of those devices. So, that's just my 2 cents.
Shrinking the expense. What's the most expensive thing? Real estate, then employees? No, employees, then real estate? Or maybe that's shifting as we speak. Darren, you probably know this. Have you guys seen the Google Duplex AI assistant? She can actually reserve in what is a believable make reservations at a restaurant as if she's a real person. And they did this on their expo show. And it sounded real. It even, the AI paused as if like, oh, what did you say, in such a way that there was a stutter in the response. And I listened to it 3 times. I said, wow, if it was really that good, to your point, maybe I'd listen. That'd be great. Because I hate robo-advisors with a passion.
Andreas, you should watch this movie. It's an Al Pacino movie, and I can't remember the name of it, but he's a Hollywood producer, and he creates a star, and she is not really a star. She's like a hologram, and she becomes a giant star, so big of a star he can't keep the lie alive anymore. So he figures he needs to kill her, right? I mean, it's a computer, and so he kills her, and then he gets arrested and tried for murdering this big star who really wasn't a big star at all. She was. You love the movie. It's that along that same line, right?
Oh no,
where the AI fooled everybody, right?
Yeah.
Where the technology actually got to the point where it fooled everybody.
Well,
But if only it was that good, right?
Well,
you
but then
gotta
there's a
watch
moral
it.
dilemma.
Like it's really it's kind of fun to watch.
I'm an Al Pacino fan. I would like to see it, and I hopefully will watch it.
You can see
That
the
would be a
clip on
nice break.
YouTube.
Well, that'll be my starting point. Everybody starts at YouTube today, I think. So then go ahead.
I was just going to say this thing about cookies going away. And I hadn't heard much about that, but I've heard of some alternatives that take people say, well, how are the cookies do that? So now I understand why there were these other people working on these other technologies that people say, well, cookies do that. So then now people are talking about no cookies. And then you mentioned how might that affect the real estate industry and how might that affect retargeting? And I can just say the way I feel about the internet and leads and real estate agents is they overpay for stuff that's really not valuable because they can't figure out how to use it. So Zillow says 100 million people go to the Zillow site every month. And Realtor.com says 60 million people go to the Realtor.com site every month. And Trulia says 70 million people go to the real estate, go to their website every month. And yet only 6 million people buy real estate during the year. So, but all of those people are potential lead sales to all of these agents who buy these and they sell them on there. You can retarget, you can do this, you can do that. But the bottom line, as these people have been saying for years, and I think it's still the case, real estate's a relationship business. So while you can develop a business off of leads of people you never met in your life off of the internet, that takes some doing. And there are other ways to do it the old-fashioned way, like meeting people, talking to people, going to little league baseball games. I mean, becoming the expert in the community, knowing about the change to the houses in the neighborhood because you were in that neighborhood before they made the room addition, build trust and confidence. And so cookies going away, no big deal.
Well, so your network is still your net worth, tried and true today. Good people building your business, and I heard it. I think it was actually the Harvard Business Review. There was a discussion about becoming an investigative reporter in everything you do. I don't watch a lot of sports, but I could carry a conversation, and I could certainly get to a point of you talking to me about sports in a way in which that it was remarkable and memorable. And that's something we can do in real estate, knowing everything about planning and zoning. Recently we put a tenant in. EAC put a tenant. It was off the cuff conversation from a zoning approval to pave the roads. This is not a zoning approval, but town committee approval. Off the cuff, they said, "Oh yeah, we've got to repave those in a zoning meeting." And it turned out that down the road through two conversations, it was, well, where are we going to put those guys when they come into town? Where do they launch from? Which turned into a nice office lease, a nice equipment lease, exterior lease for the period which this was for. So network is net worth, always will be, digital or personal, but AI is not part of your network personally, not mine anyways. I don't talk to Siri personally. I won't do it. Do it, man.
I don't either. That doesn't mean that somehow, some way, things I like end up getting shown to me.
Oh, well, do you have Alexa? Because she's listening.
No, I don't have anything like that. I don't turn that stuff on, right? I don't need it. I stay home most of the time and I can get up and do things myself. So I don't use that at all, but it doesn't matter.
It still shows up.
Stuff shows up, and it's not like stuff that would just show up because like it's stuff that's age specific, right? That somebody's looking at my record, they knows that these are the kinds of things that should pop up. And that's amazing.
It's incredible what they can do today. Salesforce has a big marketing cloud behind it and this goes to telematics. So if anyone listening, and those of us who have a car that's newer than 2015, GPS or not, your car is on a map all the time.
That's how they can tell you the time that it takes to get somewhere because they know all the car data. And you ever wonder, he looks up 15 minutes to the next exit. No, usually it'll tell you how many miles to the next exit, but now it tells you time.
Yeah, because you're being tracked all the time. Somewhere in there, somebody probably left a Fitbit in your drawer, which is tracking you too, of some sort. But it's incredible. We are being tracked at every moment, and we are being a profile has been built. And whenever I think of profile, I think like an FBI profiler. But a profile of us is being built in every action we take. How long did I pause at that store? Just your cell phone now. How long did I pause at a certain ad on my TV? Everything's being tracked, aggregated, and then given out. But going back to the cookie statement, a term I'm hearing more often now is first party data agreements, which I love because what's the MLS in its infancy and its standard today? It's an agreement between multiple parties, first parties, to share data. So I think in that respect, realtors and real estate professionals have been ahead of the curve. Our network is our net worth, but we also understand the value of information. So I
Well,
think, go ahead.
no,
Yeah.
I was just thinking about that story of the young teenager who started getting all these flyers and marketing materials about pregnancy, and this father didn't even know anything, and was wondering what happened. And there was this long investigation, and eventually they found, I think it might have been Target or something,
Yeah, I think
and
you're
somebody
right.
somebody worked out that if somebody buys like a big bag and a colorful rug and multivitamins, it generally is an indicator that somebody is pregnant. I don't know how they came up with that, but there's these kinds of things that we don't think about that the data tells us that we wouldn't think about.
Yeah, you just gave an example of an algorithm. Now, what algorithm they use to determine that someone is pregnant has to do with, like you said, what do they buy? What perfumes do they buy? What powders do they buy? Do they buy diapers? And right, so this has been happening to us for years. We go into like the Safeway store, and then they ask us when we're put all our stuff through, and then they say, "Do you have a phone number?" And you give them your phone number, and then they give you a discount. Well, what you're really telling them is you buy milk on Wednesdays. You pay, right? I mean, everything about you, because they know when, and that helps them stock the shelves and know, hey, Saul's coming in on Wednesday. We better have a lot of pomegranate juice, right? Not really, but I mean, that's what they know, that they're going to use this stuff just based on this history of consumer use of their their service, their product.
But they do this in cybersecurity as well. Like Palantir, for example, is a tool. If somebody comes in and starts their computer at 8:30 every day and has been working for years, and then they start coming in at 9:08, logging in 9:15, it's an indicator they've probably got a job and they're moving on.
Yeah.
And
That's what that tool is for. It
well, that's
predicts
the kind
employee
of thing
leaving.
Yeah.
Wow.
Information to insight.
Yeah.
And cyclical and tracking cyclical changes. So we already talked about cyclical changes in the economy and in real estate, and using information and leveraging your network. Network is your network. Being generalists. This was a busy call today. All around the board. And matter of fact, we've actually hit the top of the hour, and as always the format. What is the one biggest thing you would suggest that real estate professionals or others do in this coming month to prepare for the future? I know we talked about what's that big shift, but let's go around and then we're going to close out and look forward to seeing everybody next month. Darren, why don't you go first? We don't see enough of you. What's the one big thing people should start doing? Because what was the name of the app that's going to tell me if I'm quitting? One more time.
Well, there is that tool, Palantir, and there's other tools that see if there's a change in employees' behavior that may indicate that they're going to leave and may be of interest to focus on that person. So, yeah, you've got to think about how you're one of the things as well that I've noticed is that we, as forensic investigators, we often look at photographs, and we can look at EXIF data and determine where somebody has been and what kind of phone they're using and all kinds of information from that one photograph. But you can do this on your iPhone now. You can slide up the picture and you can see all that metadata there. And so just be careful when you send pictures to people, because they will know where you are and what kind of phone you have and lots of information. So think about that kind of information as well.
That's great. I didn't realize you could do that on the iPhone yet. But that's now. Can you since iPhone's big? And sorry, I just have to ask. since iPhone's new position is the security lock thing, can you take a photo without metadata as one of those raw formats?
I think the only thing you could probably do is just disable your location
All of
services,
it. And
taking pictures.
that's your only chance.
Yeah, but you're still giving away lots of information about yourself. But that's one preventative measure. Yeah.
All right. No, that's good advice. I take it further. Don't get photographed. Anything online is online forever. So, let's go back to Polaroid cameras.
Exactly.
Um, Saul, you're shaking your head there. I know you're laughing. I'm telling you, I think I see an Apple Watch on your shelf back there.
No Apple Watch. That's actually a SpongeBob watch,
Oh,
right?
even
Because
better.
that's my granddaughter years ago, right? She was, because my granddaughter's like 27 or 26, and she has a baby. So when we raised her. So when she lived here, I thought it'd be a good thing that Grandpa and her would have SpongeBob watches, right? So mine, I figured I would never want to change it because I'll go on Antique Roadshow sometime. It'll still be in the box, and it'll be worth more, right? So no, I was smiling just about it's a complex world. And so I think people need to start looking at niches, lots of niches. And a niche is not necessarily, it's a lot of things. I could be a 1031 exchange. That could be my niche. My niche could be doctor clients or nurse clients, or there's a number of niches, and we need to be exploring and demonstrating and first figuring out and then demonstrating expertise, because it's about relationships. So first you got to build rapport, then you got to gain trust and confidence. And the way you do that is by demonstrating that you have knowledge and demonstrating that you have expertise, because that builds trust. And so niches, I want to learn more about the tax changes that are possibly coming down. I want to learn more about some of the advantages that are coming to my city because of the federal money that's going to be spent to change the transportation infrastructure. I want to prospect tax preparers because they already have the trust and confidence of a big clientele of people. So I think people today, with the uncertainty, look at niches, but not one. I'm not talking about one. I'm talking about looking at different, really, I'm talking about different areas where you can gain more knowledge than other people, and then figure out how to express that.
It's fantastic. Becca, now it is definitely nightfall there.
It
Or
is
your street
definitely
lamp went out.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna give mine, and then I'm gonna have to hop off. But
Absolutely.
Saul, I'm so happy and yet so sad that you totally stole mine in many ways, because I wanted to talk about niches too. Because in real estate, I think that niche positioning is really important, especially right now, to own and dominate your space. So like as a marketer, I get to be a generalist. As a real estate professional, that's not quite as easy to do. And if you can pick what you're doing and really grow, even if it's in a different direction, but dominate it, like let everybody know this is what you do and own it, and let people say good things about you doing it, and get that communication out there, it's going to be really helpful looking forward, because 12 months from now, you're going to be really glad that you started it now, because it's with the inflation, with interest rates rising, all of these things make that spread a little closer together, and the competition's going to be fierce. So niche.
Love it. And Darren, with that, is niche still the cybersecurity thing? Well, next call, next month, answer that one.
Sure.
As far as my 2 cents at the end of this roundtable, I think paying attention to going green, to Becca's point and Saul's point about niches, although you may dedicate to mastery in certain areas and communicate it really well, I think now more than ever, the impact perception, your brand is very important. And I think being green or being very intentional about who you do business with, to Darren's point about overseas, if if you're with, you are who you're with, right? And how you make things and the way you proceed. So yes, knowledge, but just as important, making sure that your network and your own infrastructure to do business is rock solid as you move forward. That's my 2 cents on it. And for those tuning in, joining us on the 17th for our first guest appearance, one-on-one, we have Inland Green Capital. Special guest announcement coming soon. And for those of us tuning in every month, who knows what next month will bring, except it will be a happier, better place than we are today for those of us that need it. And for those of us in a great place today, onward and upward is the best direction we have. It's the only one God gave us. So, Saul, thank you as always for joining. Darren, thank you for joining. Mr. Mendoza back there, you can't get to 1,000 if you don't do one. Is that still your best advice for those?
Yeah. If you haven't started one, then yeah, that's my best advice for you. Start the one. I would also say, if you're in a season where things aren't exactly moving, if you're not in a harvest season, then plant some seeds so that you're ready for the next harvest.
I love it. I love it. Will you lead us out? Thank you again, guys. I'm looking forward to a great show next month and looking forward to a great month overall. Happy
Thank you.
2022.
See you next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Great to see everyone.
Cheers.